This is Presidential Candidate Deon Jenkins coming to you today with another speech essay. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and press the notification bell. Dr. Neely Fuller once stated that white supremacy takes on both sides of an argument. And the reason this statement has so much truth behind it is because it allows white supremacy to control its side of its own narrative while also controlling yours. This tactic becomes a win-win because it puts together its own opposition, as if playing both sides of the chessboard. It can not only control the pieces of its own side, but also control the pieces of its opposition. And unfortunately, this tactic is being used in the discussions for reparations for blacks who descended from American slaves. The reason why this tactic of controlling both narratives is so effective is because most people do not understand that true reparations is a measure that is supposed to dismantle the system of white supremacy. And once people understand that it is expected to be used for that purpose, then it becomes more clear. And white supremacy trying to control the reparations movement does not work, because you would see right through their mirage. The word reparations is the extension word from its root word, repair. Repair meaning to mend the damage, to construct from a destruction caused, to make whole. So if you repair blacks who descended from American slaves, would mean that you would repair the damage caused by white supremacy. And if you repair the damage from white supremacy, would mean that white supremacy can no longer affect you, which would mean that it could no longer exist. When speaking of reparations, we must understand that it is a conflict of interest for white supremacy. And any conflict of interest for this diabolical system becomes a threat. We must understand that white supremacy is a system to keep whites reigning supreme, and that it gives white people advantages over other groups, creating a hierarchy system with black people being at the very bottom of that hierarchy. White supremacy is a protection of the misdistribution of power and resources for a certain lineage of people who classify as white. And this protection comes in many forms. Sometimes it would even allow other groups to classify as white as long as it keeps the hierarchy intact, and by keeping the bottom group subjected to exploitation as well. And in our case, the bottom group who was chosen for this position is blacks who descended from American slaves. So before you start claiming that you are willing to support anyone stopping for reparations and that you do not care if they are white or whatever else, before you decide to give your vote to the next white politician a little bit more refined than Bernie Sanders, you must ask yourself a few questions. And those questions are, is true reparations a conflict of interest for white people? And if it is, then why would any white person alive fight for the dismantling of a system that allows for them to have advantages in life by giving them equity and power against other groups? The reason you would ask these questions is simple. You must ask these questions to prevent yourself from white and non-black politicians and organizations stomping behind the idea of reparations in order to either get your vote and or deceive you into supporting their own agendas. Also, you must protect yourself from the infiltration of reparations. You must understand that once politicians truly understand that by getting a certain demographic of the population to vote for them, then they must put reparations as a policy, is when the tricks are going to start twirling. The reparations word is used so vaguely, and that in itself is dangerous because all it would take is for a white candidate to promise reparations and galvanize millions of black people to vote for him or her, and at best give you a version of reparation that is not true reparations, and at worst deceive your vote and completely switch on you once elected. And no, you are not going to be able to force a politician's hands to give you true reparations. They will let this country completely burn down before handing over the keys to their power. And anybody telling you that you do not have to form your own politicians because whites comply to Asian and white Hispanic demands is either ignorant of this or lying to you. Asians and white Hispanics were not chosen to be at the very bottom of the system's hierarchy, but we were. And they will comply to Asian and white Hispanic policies and demands if those demands invade any progress for us. For instance, Democrats will allow illegal immigrants to vote, knowing that it will water down the influence of Black American voters. And that is only one example. I think we are very aware that Asians and white Hispanics did not get any progress because of anything they forced upon white people in power. On the contrary, they were allowed progress. And a lot of that progress came at the expense of Blacks who descended from American slaves. If Blacks, Asians, and Hispanics teamed up, we would run white supremacy into the earth's mantle. But we have not been able to make that a reality because many of the other groups have decided to comply with white supremacy. So in return, they get incentivized for complying. It's just that simple. I am published for defining true reparations, and I prove that reparations has 4 elements based upon the 4 elements of society: a defensive structure, capital, land, and having access to capital. These 4 elements are what every society in the world is based upon, and America used every element in its society to harm Blacks who descended from American slaves. For more information on the true definition of reparations, go to my video entitled The 4 Elements of Reparations. This is presidential candidate Deon D. Jenkins, the only reparations presidential candidate, the only Black agenda priority presidential candidate, and I approve this message. Thanks for listening.